Hello and welcome back to our class guide series for Gloomhaven 2nd Edition. I am Emerging Boat, and today we're going to be talking about Satha. Now, Satha is not technically part of Gloomhaven 2nd Edition. She is from the Mercenary Packs, which are separate add-ons that you can buy, so you can play any of those mercenaries in technically any of the Haven games. And I have played Frosthaven, but I have not played her in Frosthaven, so I will be talking about her in the context of Gloomhaven 2E. I do think that makes a little bit of a difference in how some of her cards work. I will get into that, at least for one specific card, I will be talking about that. But she can port over into any of those games. She's a very fun character to play. For this video, we will start by talking about an overview of her as a character, how she works, what she's good at. Then we're going to talk about all of her cards. We're going to start with her level 1 and level X cards. Then we're going to progress through her level up cards. And for each level up card, we're going to talk about why would you pick a certain card at a specific level, and give you some information that you can use to help make that decision for yourself based on how you are playing Satha. After that, we will go into talking about her perks, we'll talk about her masteries, we'll talk about her solo scenario item, and then we'll wrap it all up with some final thoughts. Satha is a 10-card class. She is rated as a 4 out of 5 for melee, a 2 out of 5 for ranged, a 3 out of 5 for mobility, a 4 out of 5 for support, a 5 out of 5 for defense, and a 1 out of 5 for control. She has a 2 out of 5 for complexity and an elemental affinity of ice. She does not necessarily have unique class mechanics, but she does have 2 unique persistent cards that she gets at level 1. Those will be the first 2 cards that we talk about when we're going through the level ups. Normally, I like to talk about them in increasing initiative order. So we would talk about the level 1 cards in increasing initiative, then the X cards. But the first 2 cards that we will take a look at are going to be her 2 unique cards, Get Behind Me and Take Command. As mentioned on the front of the character board here, Get Behind Me is more of a defense-oriented build. It's a card that gives you shield, but you need to be the one taking damage, because if an ally takes damage during a round, then at the end of that round, then the card has to get discarded. So you need to be on the front lines and taking most of the damage if you're playing Get Behind Me. Take Command is more of an offensive / support based card. It allows you to increase the damage and movement that allies do during your turn. So one of the mechanics that Satha kind of works around is the ability to grant allies the ability to do things. This can come in the form of granting attacks, granting movement, or straight up granting the ability for an ally to play a card from their hand. Now, I did say the Get Behind Me build and the Take Command build. I don't think you necessarily have to look at these cards as mutually exclusive in terms of building around them. For example, Get Behind Me, you are going to still need to be doing a lot of damage yourself with Satha. You don't have enough defensive cards where you can say, I'm just going to be tanking and that's it. You're going to have to be doing a lot of balance between tanking with mitigating some damage, but then also dealing a lot of damage yourself. Similarly, for Take Command, you are going to be granting out a lot of attack abilities, but you still need to focus on doing damage as well. You can also play these cards together. Like, you can play both Get Behind Me and Take Command and play a kind of combined build. I think there's a viable strategy behind that. But if you're just starting out with Satha, I think it is a good idea to just pick one of those cards and think about how do you build around this to start as your journey with Satha begins. And then once you get comfortable with building around one of those cards, then you can kind of start thinking about how are you going to flex out into other abilities. I'll say that I think early on, building around Take Command is a little bit easier because I think it's going to be I'll save that part for the card discussion, but I think if you're a little bit torn on what you want to build around and you are early in both level, like if you're starting off at level 1 with Satha and you are starting off early in Frosthaven or Gloomhaven and you don't have a lot of items available to you, I would recommend building around Take Command rather than Get Behind Me, because I think it's going to be a little bit smoother to start off with. That's at least based on my own experience. I didn't even mention before, I did play Satha in my Gloomhaven 2nd Edition campaign that I'm doing on YouTube. I've played her up through level 7. I had retired her somewhat recently. And I initially did start with her as the Get Behind Me build. She was the 4th character I added to my party. I added her after a few scenarios. So I started with Get Behind Me, and then I ended up switching to building around Take Command. But both are great cards, and I will talk about strategies for how you can use each of them in a couple minutes. Satha does have a large health pool, which makes it tenable for her to be able to be a tankier character. And genuinely, I think she's just a really fun and really well-designed character. I had a lot of fun playing as her, so I'm excited to get into talking about some of these cards. I think that's all I wanted to mention for the overview. Yeah, let's get into the card discussion. The first card we'll talk about at level 1 is Get Behind Me. The top action is a shield 1, and then at the end of a round in which an ally was attacked, you must move this card to your discard pile. This is a persistent non-loss card, and you get an experience when you play it. The bottom action is a move 4, and the initiative is 11. First off, both the initiative and that bottom movement are excellent. Move 4 is very solid, and we love pairing a great move with a strong initiative, either a really fast initiative or a really slow initiative. So if you're just looking at those aspects of the cards, very, very good. But let's talk about the heart of this card, which is the top action. Persistent Shield 1 is so good. This is a little bit contrary to what I just said a couple minutes ago, but especially at early in your Gloomhaven or Frosthaven career, when you are playing at lower scenario levels, or just depending on the difficulty you're playing at, Shield 1 can be mitigating half to a third of the incoming damage that you're about to take from an attack. Generally, tanking in itself is not a viable strategy for most Gloomhaven characters, but when we get cards like this that are persistent shield, it starts to become a reality that yes, you can do this. Your mileage may vary as you start to increase the scenario difficulty, and the shield 1 is only reducing the incoming damage to from, like, let's say 5 damage to 4 damage. That is still a big reduction over multiple attacks, but it can mean the difference between, like, you being able to be the consistent target for enemies versus you being able to take attacks for a round or two and then needing your allies to come in and take attacks too. And that's where I want to talk about the second part of that top action. At the end of a round in which an ally was attacked, you must move this card to your discard pile. Do not lock yourself into thinking that, like, this card is only valuable if you can somehow manage to just stay as the only person that gets attacked for 4 or 5 rounds, or just needing to keep this card out for the entirety of a scenario. Even if you can manage to only go 1 round, the round in which you play this, as no other allies get attacked, like, if you can just keep this card up for at least 2 rounds, that's generally a good value for what this card is giving you. I would say you probably want to aim for trying to go, like, have it out for at least 2 to 3 rounds. If you can get it beyond that, then that's good. But you may also want to be bringing this card, like, even if you go an entire room before you rest, you may want to discard this card before you rest so that you can get it back into your hand, because you may find it valuable to just have it for the action economy, like being able to keep an even number of cards in your hand, so that way you're just able to maintain your endurance and get the most turns out of a scenario. But you shouldn't feel like you have to keep this card up nonstop. And I think that's especially worth saying for playing at higher difficulty scenarios, or even just playing some harder scenarios in general. You may need your allies to come in and to take attacks. Like, you have a large health pool, and having persistent shield 1 is great. But if you are not using the resource that is your allies' health pool, you're not really maximizing the effectiveness of your party. So there are going to be points where you want your allies to be taking attacks, and you shouldn't feel bad about this card getting put into your discard pile because you did that. It is a strategy. It's a tool. You just have to figure out the right timing for it to work. But once you get this card out, especially at level 1, you don't have a lot of other quote-unquote defensive cards you're going to be playing, so you'll probably just start switching to doing attacks yourself, which is good synergy with this card. Satha has a lot of good melee attacks, and you want to be on the front lines and being the focus of monsters for the most part. So you will not have problems being able to play her other melee cards while you have this out and maintaining having this out. Now, monsters that have multi-target effects can be the bane of your existence for this card, because you may be doing all that you can to try to stay in the front lines and take all the attacks from monsters, but then as soon as a monster gets an attack that does multi-target and attacks you and then somebody else, then you have to discard this card at the end of the round. But again, it's nice that it's at least at the end of the round. Anyway, I think that's a pretty good overview of this card. Let's move on to our other persistent card that we can get at level 1, which is technically a level X card. And that is Take Command. The top action is a loss attack. It's an attack 4 with the 3 hexes directly in front of you in that kind of wave pattern. And then the ability after that says heal 4, target all allies in the red hexes of the attack ability. This gives you 2 experience after you play it, and like I mentioned, it is a loss. The bottom action is a persistent card. It's our other persistent card. At level 1 is a non-loss persistent, and it says allies add +1 attack to all their attacks they perform during your turn, and allies add +1 movement to all their move abilities they perform during your turn. You get an experience for that action, and this is at initiative 55. That top action is a great, nice loss action to be able to play at the end of the scenario. You know, maybe for most of the scenario, you're using that bottom persistent card for Take Command. And then after the first couple of rooms, once you get into that last room, you decide, I don't need the extra, consistent extra damage from that bottom ability. So then you play the top of Take Command, get some burst damage out, potentially some healing. It's a really strong ability. It does have the ability to go up to an attack 12. Or even like an attack 8 heal 4. I mean, it's going to take some work to make sure all 3 of those hexes are filled, but it's possible and not too unlikely if you have a larger party. But again, let's get to the main attraction of this card, which is the bottom action. Being able to add 1 attack to all attacks that an ally performs on your turn is very powerful. I think at level 1, it can be a little bit hard to see the full value of this. There are a couple of very specific cards that I think this can be an unbelievable value. One of those is at level 1, but at level 1 you don't have a ton of granting attacks or granting movement. So I think at level 1 this may feel a little underwhelming, but you get a lot of abilities to grant allies the ability to do things later on in level ups. Similar to Get Behind Me, this card is persistent, so you can persistent non-loss, so you can keep it out for an entire scenario if you really want to, but you could also discard it and bring it back into your hand, so that way you can keep an even amount of cards in your hand. Unlike Get Behind Me, this card does not have a rider on it that forces you to discard it under any circumstances. You can just choose to keep this out the entire scenario. And I think when I first started playing with this card, I was initially like discarding it and bringing it back into my hand. Or if I had a scenario where I thought it was going to last a long time, I would do that. But in a lot of cases, I would choose to just keep this out as a persistent card that I never put into my discard pile. I found that oftentimes I would just want to get this out of the way early, so that way later on in scenarios I could focus on moving with Satha or doing some other like fun effects that she has on some bottom actions of her card. So I think this is kind of a personal preference, or your mileage may vary type thing, where you can absolutely discard it if you want to. But if you don't, she is good enough that you're not going to be severely hurt by the lack of endurance, or the slightly reduced endurance that you have of like going down to essentially a 9-card character. But it's nice to have that flexibility. I think it's good to be able to have that kind of playstyle choice, and you may play it differently depending on the scenario. I think most people will also focus on that +1 attack, because the +1 attack to me is the more interesting part of that ability. It can do a lot of damage, but don't forget about the +1 movement, because there are some cards where adding 1 extra movement to the granted movement from Satha is going to be a big deal. Like there's a card, for example, Wolfpack Tactics has a grant allies move 1. Changing that from move 1 to move 2 is enormous. But then I think in Frosthaven too, this is probably the extra movement is going to be weighted a little bit more, because I think there are more scenarios in Frosthaven that would benefit from your party having a lot of extra movement. So if you are playing this character in Frosthaven, then I think like the value of this goes up just a little bit. All right, now let's move on to the remainder of our cards. We'll go through the rest of the level 1 cards in an increasing initiative, then we'll move to the X's, and then we'll move to the level ups. Shared Glory is our next card. The top action is a persistent for the round. It gives you shield 1, and it says grant 1 ally within range 3 move 2 and infuse ice. The bottom action says the next time an ally gains any loot this round, you gain 1 loot token from the supply. Then you can loot 1, and then you grant 1 ally within range 3 loot 1, and this is all at initiative 8. This is the other shield card that Satha gets at level 1, so this does give you the potential to have a round where you have shield 2, which at level 1, shield 2 is incredible. This is also, the top action is also kind of fun in the sense that both the Get Behind Me and the Take Command builds kind of like something out of this card. The Get Behind Me is really liking that extra shield. The Take Command is liking that movement that can be granted with that. But as you go up in level, that top action I think is going to be more valued by the Get Behind Me build. Early on, you may like this card also just for that Ice Infusion because, I mean, granted, you're not going to be just playing it for the Ice Infusion, but it is one of 3 sources of consistent Ice Infusion that we can get at level 1. So for that alone, I think it kind of draws your attention in to think about how you want to fit this into your hand, and if this is one of the cards that you want to be using as your main Ice Infusion cards. The initiative is also worth talking about here because this is going to be her second best initiative that she ever gets. She does get some fairly early initiatives, like Satha does have a decent balance of early and late initiatives. But a lot of those early initiatives do fall in the Get Behind Me card, Get Behind Me builds cards that they want to be choosing during level ups. Which makes sense. If you are going with that build, you need early initiatives so that you can get the focus on you for being able to take attacks. But for the Take Command build, you are still going to want to keep some initiative cards, like low initiative cards in your hand as well. So Bottom of Shared Glory is a really nice loot action. It's one of the few that it's just kind of like your allies are okay with you looting because you can also grant them a loot, and then when you grant them a loot, if they get things out of it, then you also get something out of it. So it's a great card. I think if you are going with focusing on Get Behind Me, this card's going to stick around in your hand for quite some time. For Take Command, it'll probably be cut a little bit earlier. Next is Bring Them Down, which is an attack 2 at range 3, and then strengthen 1 ally within range 3 and infuse ice. The bottom action is move 2 and then add +1 attack to the first attack performed by each ally targeting an enemy adjacent to you this round, and this is at initiative 16. I really like this top action. There's a lot of value going on in it. Attack 2 is not a crazy good attack, but it's an attack 2 at range 3, which is pretty good. But then it is a just consistent source of strengthening an ally. This will be important to consider later, especially for some of the cards that would lean more to the Take Command build. And then you're also infusing ice. If you are going that Take Command build and you're not bringing shield cards with you, like for example, you're not bringing the card we just talked about, Shared Glory, this could be a nice card if you're trying to open a room because having a ranged attack is nice when you are not sure where enemies are going to be starting off in a new room. And then if an ally is planning on going into that room and doing some kind of big attack, it's really nice to be able to get a nice strengthen on them. And then like I mentioned before, at level 1, you only have 3 cards that have consistent ice infusion on them. And this is one of them, so it ties in nice together with all those other things that you want to do, giving you a really, really great top action. The bottom action is good to awesome. Move 2, nice. Being able to add +1 to the first attack performed by each ally targeting an enemy adjacent to you this round can be really great, especially compared or when paired with Take Command. If you paired this with a card that we'll talk about in a little bit, a level X card, Wolfpack Tactics, you could end up doing an attack 2 and then granting an ally an attack 4 essentially. The usefulness of this also goes up as you have a larger party, just because more allies are going to be benefiting from that extra attack. Overall, a really nice card. I think if you are the Take Command build, this card is going to be sticking around in your hand for a while, and then if you're the Get Behind Me build, it'll probably be there at level 1, but it may get cut a little bit earlier compared to the Take Command. Next we have Spur Their Spirits. The top action is heal 1 and then heal 1 self and then give yourself ward. And then 1 ally within range 3 may immediately play 1 card from their hand and perform the top or bottom action of the card. If they do, gain 1 experience. The bottom action is negate the source of damage an ally would suffer this round. Sorry, the next source of damage. And this is at initiative 18. I love this card. I think the usefulness of this card can vary a little bit depending on your party, because the allies who are going to benefit the most from this are going to be ones that have large AoEs. Because if you are the take command build and then you use this card to allow another ally to do some kind of large AoE attack, that's a lot of extra damage you're granting. Additionally, you may be granting an ally the ability to perform a card at an initiative that they normally would not be able to reach. Cragheart, for example, was a character that I loved using this card on, because Cragheart has a good number of AoEs, especially some of their loss AoEs, which are incredibly powerful. But Cragheart is also known for having not great initiatives, so being able to use a card like this to let him do a powerful attack super early in the round led to really consistent outcomes that he was otherwise not able to reach on his own. We were able to get him to go before most of the enemies were going in the room, so the positioning that we started off with at the start of the round was the positioning that he was able to think about and keep for his attack. The other nice thing you can do is that if you set up before this round and an ally has a card they want to play that requires an element to be infused, you can do some nice things with element infusion and consumption on this card. Where maybe in the round before you play this card, the element gets infused, and in the round that you play this card, you are allowing that ally to consume that element as a part of that action they're playing during your turn, and then that ally just reinfuses the element on their turn, setting themselves up for another big attack next round. There's just a lot that you can do with this, and it's one of my favorite cards because it's not a class mechanic necessarily, but it is a cool mechanic where it makes you really think about just the interesting combinations that you can do. I hate it in terms of it like really feeds into my analysis paralysis, and I would often spend a lot of turns thinking about like, okay, if I'm playing 4 characters, what is the best action to use for this action? So sometimes I would get locked into that thinking for a little bit too long. I also think that maybe it's going to be a little bit harder to optimize this card if you are not playing solo. Like I was playing all of my characters solo, so it was very granted it would take me a little bit of time to think about things, but it was easier for me to plan how I wanted to use this card. It may take time if you are playing in a party with other actual people. It may take time for you to get the feel for who it is best to grant this ability to, and then for your allies to remember that you have this card available, what the initiative is of the card, and how they want to balance out their use of infusing and consuming elements and all that good stuff. But anyway, it's a great action, and it's paired with having a heal oneself and ward. That is perfect if you are poisoned and you're trying to look for some small heal to be able to get that poison off of you. This is a great card to do it. You're now giving yourself a little bit of defensive capability by either clearing a negative condition or just getting that little bit of healing, and then warding yourself, and then giving potential for big damage output. The bottom action can be very good. There were definitely some scenarios and some situations where I did play this card for the bottom action, but it was very rare. I was often trying to play this card for the top action because it is just so powerful. Anyway, I need to move on because I could talk about this card by itself for like 20 minutes, but we will go on to the next card. Combined Might. The top action is an attack 3, pierce 2, and then add pierce 2 to the next attack performed by an ally this round. The bottom action is a move 3, and if you consume ice, then you get to grant ward within range 2, and you gain an experience, and this is all at initiative 22. I love this card because of how much I liked playing the bottom of this card. One of the things that I found when playing Satha is that there were so many times where there were so many top actions that I really wanted to be doing, and not quite as many bottom actions that I was really dying to play. Like for a lot of cards, I just generally prefer to be playing the top action of it rather than the bottom. But I really liked how just consistently good this bottom action was. You have enough ice infusion at level 1 that is not hard to be able to get the ice to be able to infuse or get the ward out here. And being able to do a move 3, ward range 2 is great. You're either trying to ward an ally, you can ward yourself, you have flexibility in how you want to give out that ward, and I was often split in how I was doing it. There was a lot of times where I warded myself, But then there was also a number of times where I might play this with the top of Spur their Spirit so I get ward on myself and then ward on an ally as well. So I valued this card a lot for just knowing that in most scenarios, this was going to be a consistent staple bottom action for me. But the top action, again, is very good and it's a little bit more situational, but there are more shielded enemies in Gloomhaven 2nd edition compared to Gloomhaven 1st edition. And I think there's also a fair amount of shielded enemies in Frosthaven. I can't quite remember, but I think in general, shielding has gotten more common after Gloomhaven 1st edition. And so being able to have an attack 3 Pierce 2 for yourself is great. And then you're additionally just giving Pierce 2 to an ally. That can help you to melt down shielded enemies, especially if you don't have a lot of other great ways to deal with shields. So I'm a big fan of this card. It stuck around with me for a while. I think at some point, even if it does get cut out of your hand, it may kind of remain as a tempting sideboard card for that Pierce alone. But in general, very big fan of this card. Lead the Charge has a top action of attack 3, and then add +1 attack, push 2, and gain 1 experience if you were adjacent to no enemies at the start of your turn. The bottom action is a move 3 and grant 1 ally within range 3, move 2, and this is at initiative 39. This is another card where I think it is really tempting to want to play that top attack action because it is really good. Being able to do an attack 4, push 2, especially depending on how much forced movement ability you have in your party, this could be one of the best forced movement cards that your party has. And so you may get a lot of value out of this attack from opening a room and just using it to do an attack on an enemy, push them through a trap and maybe kill them. But I also think it's a realistic thing, similar to our last card, Combined Might, to say that you want to generally be using this for the bottom action, because a move 3 and then granting an ally move 2 or move 3 if you have take command out is really powerful. It can be a nice staple action if that's how you want to treat it. Especially when you consider that granting allies movement is not just about granting the movement. It's potentially about setting them up so that they do not need to use that movement themselves. Therefore, they are freeing themselves up for a bottom action that can be used for dealing damage rather than having to get themselves into position. Maybe that's just stating the obvious, but I think the impact of being able to do that is huge. The initiative is not great on this card. We're starting to get into the territory where we have some pretty bad initiatives just because it's kind of inconsistent with if you think you're going to be going before or after enemies. But both actions are very good, and I think your value on them is going to depend a little bit on party composition. And if you have a lot of forced movement already with some of your allies, and if you can rely on them for doing those things, and if you're, depending on how much mobility your allies have, could also weight how much you value the bottom of Lead the Charge. But overall, it's another great card. Victory Rush has a top action of attack 3 at advantage, and then if the attack ability killed an enemy, perform Strengthen, targeting the ally closest to you or self. The bottom action is an attack 2, heal 1 at range 2, and this is at initiative 63. You really want to be using that top action to kill an enemy, because if you don't kill an enemy, an attack 3 at advantage is it's fine. If you do kill an enemy, being able to give that strengthen to you or to someone else it pushes the card to another level. Especially as you get to some other later cards that have effects that only work on allies that have strengthen. I could see a reasonable argument to keep this card in your hand for quite some time, although admittedly it was a little bit of an earlier cut for me just because at some point just the attack 3 at advantage was not good enough to keep around in my opinion. But I will end up coming back to this card when I'm discussing another card, and if potentially I should have been using this action for longer than I was. The bottom action, attack 2, is not super sexy, but at the same time, it's an attack 2 as a bottom action of a card. So anytime you have attacks on the bottom of a card, it should pique your interest because it's something that can help you maximize your damage for the round. They're not common. It's unfortunate that the bottom of this card is paired with the top of this card, because you'd really like to be able to do the top of this card to be able to give yourself strengthen potentially, and then use the bottom of this card to do an attack 2 at advantage. But at the same time, there are still better uses for the top of Victory Rush, so it's not that heartbreaking that they're on the same card. That heal 1 is also nice because you look at that as just a way to be able to clear poison and or wound off of you or an ally. Being able to have these small heals for clearing poison off yourself is very good because Satha, whether you're playing the take command build or the get behind me build, in both cases you're generally going to be on the front lines, and so if you have these ways of clearing poison off yourself or an ally, don't overlook that. It's really good. If you have a scenario where the enemies are not dealing wound and poison as much, it's a little bit less valuable because heal 1 by itself, especially as you start to level up and it becomes like, 1/16 of your health pool, 1/20th of your health pool. It's not, it's not amazing, but again, it's not really meant for that. I see it more as a condition clearing utility. Blade of the North is our next card. The top action is an attack 3, but if you consume ice, you can turn it into an attack 5 and gain an experience. The bottom action is a loss action, and it says grant one ally within range 3 attack 6, and this is at initiative 76. Both halves of these cards are very, very powerful attacks. We mentioned before that you have 3 sources of consistent ice infusion that you can get at level 1. We've seen, I think, 2 of them so far, so it is not that hard to be able to set up for the ice consumption for the top of Blade of the North. Your ice infusion and consumption are relatively balanced here, so you can absolutely make this an attack 5 without too much trouble. And it's a non-loss attack 5. That's really good. Then the bottom loss action being not just technically an attack that's on the bottom of a card, but a very powerful attack in an attack 6, and it's being able to grant it to an ally within range 3, so it doesn't have to be an enemy adjacent to you. There are some occasions where, yes, maybe this could be limiting because it's trying to make sure that an ally is within melee attacking range, so depending on your party composition, this could be limiting, but in most cases it's pretty dang great. Especially if you were able to get strengthened on that ally before granting them this, and if you have take command out, this is potentially an attack 7 at advantage. That's on top of whatever attacks you were doing as the top actions of your card. So really, really good card. I feel like I've been saying that about every card so far, but I think that's just the sign of good class design. When you have a lot of cards where you're just saying that this is a really good card, I can see a good use case for this. This is a great card, I can see a good use case for this. But this is a card that can get you a lot of damage throughout the scenario, and then also get you a lot of experience if you're using it with consuming that ice every time, and then finally, in like the last room, using it for that big attack. It's not unrealistic to say that this card, throughout the course of a scenario, could get you like 5 experience. Implacable Advance is a top loss action that gives you 2 experience, and it says attack 2 stun on the 2 hexes directly in front of you. And then grant self and all allies within range 3, move 3, jump. The bottom action is a move 4, and this is at initiative 82. I mentioned it much earlier on with the first card we talked about in Get Behind Me, but big moves on strong initiatives where they're either really early or really late are really good because they help you set up for positioning either in the current round or in the following rounds. This movement and this initiative fit into that category, so that is a good combination of things. This is another card where it's just because it's paired with a top loss action, this is a card that you can look as a card that you want to be consistently playing for that bottom action. But that top loss is very powerful. Attack 2, yeah, okay, that part's not amazing. Maybe an attack 4 if you're getting, like you should be targeting 2 enemies with this, so attack 4, that's fine. Not great for a loss, but attack 2 stun on 2 enemies, then you're granting all allies within range 3 and yourself move 3, jump. There are a couple of scenarios where I brought this literally for that second part of that top action, just being able to have a top action that was granting movement and granting jump at that. I won't say any scenario numbers from Gloomhaven 2nd Edition, but there was one specific scenario where I used this, and it was like the, I won't say quite the MVP because there was a cry card that I used that was kind of the MVP, but this was second place. Just for that grant self and all allies within range 3, move 3, jump. Because keep in mind, if you have take command out, this is actually a move 4 jump, at least for your allies. Similarly, I use that attack 2 stun in a number of scenarios. There's one scenario that comes into mind also that was separate, where that attack 2 stun was totally worth it just for that part of the action. So really great powerful loss paired with a repeatable action on the other half of the card. Always a good pattern for a card. Our final level 1 card before we get to our last couple of level X cards is Dazing Sweep. Top action is an attack 2 muddle, potentially an attack 3 muddle and gain an experience if you consume ice, and this is targeting the 2 hexes directly in front of and adjacent to you. The bottom action is a move 3 jump, and then add +1 attack to your next attack this turn if you are adjacent to 2 or more enemies, and this is at initiative 86. Now this is a card where I really wish the top and bottom actions were split up, because I would love to be playing this bottom action with the top action, because yeah, obviously you're adding +1 attack to a multi-targeted attack. At level 1, our only opportunity to pair this with a similar multi-targeted attack is if we pair it with the card that we discussed on just this previous card, Implacable Advance, because then you could pair it with that top loss action, but again, that's a loss action, so you're only going to be able to do that once in this scenario if you want to do that combination. So I don't like that there's that tension between those two halves where I want to play them together, but I can't. But, you know, the top action by itself is really nice because it is both offensive and defensive. If you're consuming that ice, you're doing 2 attack 3s, so a non-loss attack 6, essentially, with Muddle. That Muddle is doing some lifting with the defensive capabilities. And then that bottom action is, again, it's a decent movement. It's only a move 3, but it is jump. It's the only jump that you have on any of your cards inherently. So unless you have some item that can help give you jump, this card can be incredibly valuable. And then, actually, I should correct myself. I misspoke, because even if you were able to pair the top and bottom actions of this card together, the bottom action of this card is worded in a way that it's only giving you +1 to your next attack. So even if you do that multi-target attack, you're only getting +1 attack to one of those attacks. So there's not really that tension between the top and bottom halves of this card. It is just nice for being able to kind of level up an attack that you're going to be doing for the other half, or for your other action, I should say. I think this card is going to generally be used more for the get behind me builds, because again, that top action is nice for both offensive and defensive. The take command build is generally going to be thinking about how it can level up other allies' attacks. But at level 1, this is going to probably be in your hand for both builds, because it is a very good card overall. Again, I think I've said it's a very good card, or it's a great card for like every card at level 1, level X so far. But it just speaks to how much value and utility you can get from all these cards, and how it can be fun to try to figure out which ones that you play well with, which ones fit your play style, and which ones that you like to kind of blend together into each other. Our second level X card, since Take Command was our first level X, the second one is Wolfpack Tactics. Attack 2, then grant 1 ally within range 3 attack 2 and infuse ice. And then a bottom action of move 3, then grant all allies within range 3 move 1, where this movement must end closer to an enemy, and this is at initiative 26. This card loves to be played with Take Command on both sides, because if you play it with Take Command, then the top becomes an attack 2 and then an attack 3, and the bottom becomes move 3 and then grant all allies within range 3 move 2. There were times where I felt like the rider on that second part of the movement was a little ambiguous, but I think the way you're supposed to interpret it as, basically, if you are an ally and you're about to receive that movement, you are going to pick an enemy that your movement is going to be relative to, and then you must move closer to that enemy. So if you take it that way, then I think it means you could end up moving away from some enemies, but it has to be moving closer to at least a specific enemy. But that enemy could be different for each ally. So I don't know if that interpretation is 100% correct. I didn't see any errata or any FAQ on it, so that's what I am going with for the sake of this video. That rider does make that movement a little bit more restricting, because it means you can't really save it for the end of a room when there's no enemies left, because then you're not, like, your allies are not going to be benefiting from it. Alternatively, it is very beneficial if you are going to be the first one to move into a door. Then going back to that top action, it is very nice because if you are using it with Take Command, you're basically doing an attack 5, because it's attack 2 and attack 3. Early on in your, I think I've talked about this in past videos, but early on in your Gloomhaven career or in your character development, your splitting an attack 5 like that into an attack 2 and attack 3 is going to be more of a negative because you're more likely to draw a negative modifier, and because you're going to be drawing multiple modifiers between you and another character, it's more likely to be less than what you would normally do with an attack 5. But as you level up and as you get better attack modifiers in your deck, that's going to be more valuable. You want to be drawing more modifiers. And I think that's where some of the interesting things come in with the take command build, or really just granting abilities in the first place, granting attacks in the first place, is that there's an interesting scalability discussion on how they look as you level up. If it's an action is granting you an attack and an ally attack, or just granting multiple attacks, or anything that's just doing multi-targeted attacks, it really becomes a conversation of like there's a different scaling curve compared to just a single target attack. Anyway, I like this card for both the take command and get behind me builds. I think it's going to stay in your hand longer for the take command build. In some cases, it could be a little awkward for the get behind me build, because since you are trying to put yourself in adjacent to the enemies and keep your allies away from the enemies, that bottom movement, that restriction, I think is intended to make it a little bit more geared towards the take command build. But it's also our third Ice Infuser as a top action, so I think with that, it just on its own it asks to be looked at, to be put into your hand at level 1. For our last level X card, we have Emboldening Call. The top action is a heal 3 at range 3, and then if the target of the heal ability was an ally, grant them move 2 and infuse light. The bottom action is a move 4, and this is at initiative 31. Move 4 is great. The initiative 31 is The top action's value, I think, is also just going to vary depending on your party composition. A heal 3 at range 3 can be very great. Combine that with giving your ally a move 2, potentially a move 3 if you're in take command. If your party has no healing, then it could be nice just to have a healing card available. Otherwise, this card isn't that exciting to me. I mean, it's fine. If you're doing the Get Behind Me build, this might be kind of an enticing card to take just for the healing for yourself. But at the same time, then you're not really getting the full value out of the card or the action with the movement, because you're not being able to grant that movement to an ally. And then that light infusion is totally party dependent, because you, I don't think, have any, you don't have any abilities that are going to consume light at all. So you're just kind of infusing that for somebody else in your party. So on that one, your mileage may vary. So yeah, overall, it's an okay card. I think it might be worth putting in your hand if you're finding you're not using those other movement cards that we talked about at level 1 and level X. If you're not using them for their bottom movement, maybe this is a card that you can take just for that consistent bottom move 4. Or if you don't have healing in your party and you want to bring this, but I think there's cards that I'd rather bring at level 1. Our first option at level 2 is Stand Firm. The top action is a persistent for the round. It gives you 2 experience if you play it, and it says heal 3, self, and then ward. Then whenever you are attacked this round, gain shield 1 for the round. This bonus is cumulative, and this infuses ice. The bottom action is a heal 1 self, and then add +2 healing if you are adjacent to an enemy, and this also infuses ice, and then this is all at initiative 12. Since that top action is a round loss and not a persistent loss, we are generally going to be playing this card more for the bottom action. And at Satha, it should not be very hard to get that rider to get an extra 2 healing if you are adjacent to an enemy. Regardless if you're doing the take command build or the get behind me build, you are going to want to be doing melee attacks. Therefore, you have other reasons to be adjacent to an enemy anyway. You have a large health pool, so you're often going to be able to get the 3 healing out of this and benefit from the 3 healing. The ice infusion on the bottom and that initiative 12 are also things that really stand out about this card. I'm going to be totally honest. I took the other card at level 2. I guess maybe I should save that discussion. While we're just looking at this card, I forgot about this card as being an option as level 2, and I partly wish I had respect into this, because there were times where I wish I had more cards that just focused on the bottom action and still had good initiatives. This card fills that role. And the top action is very powerful for when you're ready to play it. I have not used it, but being able to heal yourself and then give yourself ward and then just start stacking shield for every enemy attack you take, I could see, depending on your party size, I mean, you could easily go like 3-4 shield, no problem. I could see you getting into the double digits for shield. So I do have more thoughts on this card, but I'm going to save it for when we're doing let me talk about the other card first. And that other card is Outmaneuver. Top action is attack 3 and then grant one ally within range 3, move 3, and then this infuses ice. The bottom action is move 3, then gain advantage on all your attacks targeting enemies adjacent to one or more of your allies this round, and this is at initiative 41. Personally, I find the top action of this card to just be more exciting than the bottom action. The bottom being a move 3, that's okay, but we have better movements than that. Then getting the ability to get advantage on all your attacks targeting enemies adjacent to one or more of your allies this round. I think that sounds more powerful than I ever really got that much value out of it. The big issue being that Satha doesn't really get non-loss multi-target attacks on top actions. And since this only persists for the round, you can't really pair it with something that's going to do an action or an attack on a bottom of card. So oftentimes this means that that advantage is really just gaining advantage on your next attack. The top action though is great. Being able to do an attack 3 and then granting one of your allies within range 3 a move 3, or more likely a move 4 if you're using take command. That is really, really good. It was a nice balance, I think, to have in the hand with Wolfpack Tactics. Because you can have both those cards in your hands and start thinking about like, okay, I'm going to do an attack regardless, and then do I want my ally to be doing an attack or do I want them to be moving? Like, how can I best help them? So overall, I do think this is a nice card that can add some versatility to your hand. I think the value of that bottom action is really going to depend on if you are going to be bringing Dazing Sweep with you for a while. And you may want to look ahead to future levels to see what those other level ups are going to be, to see how much you're going to be able to maximize getting advantage on multiple attacks versus just a single attack. As for which card to take, I took Outmaneuver as part of my take command build. I have talked about the take command build and the the get behind me build. And the way that I had thought about it was, okay, well, if I'm going to do the take command build, I'm going to find all these cards that give me these grant actions, and I'm going to say, oh, those are meant for me. I'm going to generally take those at my level ups. Whereas these other cards that generally give things like shield and healing, oh, those are meant for the get behind me build. I'm not going to take those ones. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think that is too limiting. And I do think that Satha requires a little bit of planning ahead to be looking at some of those future cards, because there are oftentimes going to be level up decisions where one of your options is a really great initiative. Either it's really fast or really reliably slow, or you have a card that has one really strong initiative and then one really middling initiative. And there is a build path where you end up taking a lot of those middling initiative cards. And if you do that and you're in the heat of a scenario and you're trying to do things fast, then you become a little bit more restricted in how you play, because you end up trying to play. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more at the next level up and level 4 as well, because there's one particular card that I struggled a little bit to play well with. But the point that I'm trying to say is that don't just take a card because it has a grant and you think, oh, it has to be for take command, or, oh, this card has a shield, so therefore it has to be for get behind me. Be flexible in how you want to build and think about the initiatives that you're taking at this level and upcoming levels. Because even if you were to say take Outmaneuver and you are doing the get behind me build, the value you can get out of that Outmaneuver is that you do an attack and then you have an ally move backwards and get out of range from enemy attacks, and therefore maybe that's something that helps you to keep get behind me out. So now to answer the actual question of which card to take, I think in general, my default mindset would actually be I'm generally going to take Stand Firm. Satha will not have a shortage of reliable top actions that she wants to play. So in this case, I would really value having this card where I'm like, I know this is just rest cycle after rest cycle. I can depend on this as a nice, reliable bottom action. It's going to do some healing. It's going to be infusing ice. And it's a great initiative. This gives you some protection in terms of feeling more comfortable with being able to take some of those middling initiative cards later on. I would take Outmaneuver if you already have a plan in mind for the ways that you want to use that card. Maybe you have a character or characters in your party where you think you can really benefit from giving them some movement, setting them up so that they don't have to do movement on their turn, and just really maximizing them without having to move. Or maybe you're really planning on leading into the multi-targeted attacks that Satha does get. I mean, some of them come at later levels. there are ways that you can maximize the bottom action of that. I didn't hype it up a lot, but there are definitely ways that you can maximize it consistently in your rest cycles. It just takes a little bit of thinking about, because you have to take certain cards and play a specific way. But if you have a plan for how you want to do that, and you want to lean into like, just give me more cards that do attacks, give me more cards that can maximize damage, then sure, take Outmaneuver. But if I were to play Satha again, I would take Stand Firm. At level 3, our first option is Raze. The top action says, when the next enemy dies this round, your ally closest to the hex the dying enemy occupied gains Strengthen, and then attack 3, wound, and infuse fire. The bottom action says, if you consume ice, then at the end of each character's first move ability this round, one enemy adjacent to that character suffers 1 damage. You get an experience for this, and allows you to persist it for the round. Then you get to move 3, and then you get to grant one ally within range 3 move 3. And this is all at a fantastic initiative of 6. There's a lot going on this card. Let's focus on the top action to start. The top action is something that I expected to be using, so I took this card at my level 3. I expected to be using the top action for this card very frequently because of the card that I took at level 4. I'll talk about that more at level 4. It's doing a lot because you are potentially giving the ability to strengthen an ally, you're doing an attack, you're wounding, you're infusing an element that maybe another ally can use. But with this card, it's nice that you get the wound on that attack, but you really want an ally to be killing an enemy on their turn so that they get strengthened for the remainder of that turn and then the following turn. You don't need to try to force that to happen, because if you do that, they're only really getting strengthened for the half of their current turn, because maybe they're going to have a bottom attack that after they use their top attack to kill an enemy, they can use the bottom attack to do a strengthened attack, or vice versa, and then do strengthened attacks the following round. It's a little hard to set up, but if you can set it up, it's a really powerful combination. But because it's dependent on an ally or an enemy dying after you play this card, you really need this, the fast initiative for this card, or a faster initiative is really going to increase the value of this card, so it pairs very well with that initiative 6. Plus it also almost guarantees that wound is going to tick this round. So in that sense, it's essentially an attack 4. But I also like that you're not restricted to just saying that the enemy that you attack has to be the one that dies. It's just that when the next enemy dies this round, somebody gets strengthened, you can do your own attack. They don't have to be tied together. The bottom action is great on this card, and it's the thing that I ended up using this card more for. Not really because I wanted to use the bottom action of this card more than the top action, but because, like I talked about before, I put myself into a build that I felt like I was a little limited in the bottom actions I was doing. And I really wanted to pair the fast initiative of this with other really powerful top actions. So maybe if I were to even rebuild Satha, maybe I'd still find myself in the same situation. But the bottom effect on this is just really good. Ignore the ice consumption, because I think that effect is fine. It can be outstanding if you're able to potentially kill off a low health, high shield enemy because you're just doing direct damage with some enemies moving adjacent to it, or some allies moving adjacent to it. But to be honest, like, there were times when I used the ice element for this, mainly because I just had the ice free. I was infusing plenty of ice, so I was like, oh, I'll just use this for experience, and then I kind of forgot about even dealing the damage. But having a move 3 at initiative 6, and then also being able to grant an ally move 3, potentially move 4, there is so much versatility in that, because you can just tell an ally, like, I'm going to go before you. I mean, unless you're talking to, like, the, what is it? The Silent Knife, and then there's a little bit more of a negotiation of like, Silent Knife, are you going your super fast cards? But in most cases, you can generally say that you are going to be going before your allies, and you can say, I'm going to put you where you want to be. You do what you need to do that doesn't require movement. There were many times that this positioning really helped my allies. And again, like, just having the initiative 6 on this card was something that I really valued, because I can see you having plenty of very fast initiative cards depending on the way that you build Satha. In my case, the way I built her was a little bit more limited, so having this initiative 6 was like invaluable to me. And so I mainly used this card because of the initiative, but both actions in this card I think are very strong. Our other option is a little help here. The top action is a round persistent card that gives you 1 experience, and it says shield 1 and then grant 1 ally within range 3, attack 2, targeting 1 enemy adjacent to Satha at range 4, and the bottom is a move 5, and this is all at initiative 15. This is the card that should have been the trigger for my smooth brain to not think about shield equals get behind me build, granting equals take command build, because guess what? This card has both. So if you are a Satha that's going to be running both take command and get behind me, if you're going to try to pull that off, this is a really fun card for you because you love every bit of that top action. But specifically, I really like the synergy that top action has with the get behind me build, because obviously if you have get behind me out, you're already at shield 1. This gets you to shield 2, and then you're granting an ally an attack, and the enemy has to be adjacent to you, but your ally can be at like range 4, so more likely range 3 from you, because maybe that ally is probably behind you. Haha, get behind me. So the enemy is at range 4 from it. But it's just a card that has nice synergy because it doesn't force you to like play it in a way that is counterintuitive to get behind me. And then guess what? If you're not really playing it for that top action, or you don't think you have a situation where you need to be shielding extra this rest cycle, that move 5 is incredible. And it's a strong move at a really strong initiative. As for which card to take, yeah, I'm sure you're also saying, Emerging Boat, you literally just said on the last level up that like a lot of our level ups were going to be a really strong initiative compared to a really middling initiative. I know that's not the case here. Both of these initiatives are really, really good. But we will see a little bit more of that pattern coming up. This is another situation where I would look ahead to some of the future level ups that you're going to take to decide what you want to take here at level 3, because I think you want to take Raze if you are going to be planning on taking, for example, Strike Now at level 4. I think you're going to be looking for ways that you can give allies strengthen for that. And so Raze, the top of Raze can be a great tool for being able to make that happen. And hopefully happen in a way that the ally is strengthened for this round and the following round because they kill an enemy on their turn. I do think that the Sathas who are going to be taking Strike Now at level 4 are generally going to be the take command Sathas. So I think in this case, you can kind of look at this level up decision of Raze is probably a little bit better for the take command build for Satha. A little help here is a little bit better for the get behind me build for Satha. So if you need a rule of thumb in this case, I think it's okay to kind of use that delineation there. But if you're still unsure, I do think that Raze is a little bit more of a versatile card. Like if you know you want that shield from a little help here, great. Then I think that can be a nice, like just take a little help here just for that shield. If you're not sure that you want that shield and you're not sure which card to take, Raze can give you a lot of versatility. You also already have a lot of move 4s with Satha, so if you're missing out on that move 5 from a little help here, like that move 5 can be excellent, but you have other move 4s to be able to help accommodate it, so it's not too big of a deal if you're skipping it and missing out on that move. For our first option at level 4, we have Strike Now. The top action says attack 3, and then one ally who has strengthened may immediately play 1 card from their hand and perform the top or bottom action of the card. If they do, gain 1 experience. The bottom action is attack 2, pierce 2, infuse ice, and this is at initiative 52. There is a lot that I want to say about this card. First off, that top action is similar but different to the top of Spur their Spirits from level 1, where it's more offensive minded. You're replacing that healing and warding of yourself with just doing an attack, and then instead of just granting any ally within range 3 the ability to play a card, you're granting an ally who has strengthened. So the ceiling for this card, in my opinion, is much higher because you don't have a range restriction, and an ally that has strengthen is going to be doing a lot more damage for that card that they're playing, because especially if you have the take command out, you are going to be giving that ally +1 attack to all of their attacks that they're doing as a part of that attack. So if you are playing a multi-targeted attack with that ally, that's going to be +1 to each of those attacks. They're all going to be at advantage. There is just such a high ceiling for this card. But it does depend on your ability to give strengthen to allies. Or just for your allies to have strengthen in general. You don't have to necessarily be the one to give it to them. But for example, Raze from level 2 can be, or I'm sorry, Raze from level 3 can be a great way to try to get strengthened on your allies, because you can use this card the turn prior to make sure that you are helping an ally get strengthened, and then you're going to pop off Strike Now the next round and help them get more action outs. This is where I got a little bit frustrated though, because there were times where I really wanted to use Strike Now, but it required a lot of setup. And like I mentioned before, I wanted to be using Raze for the top action, but I ended up using it for the bottom action just because there were so many times where I'm like, I need to play a really fast initiative card, so I'm gonna have to play Raze for the bottom and then play the other card that I want to play. And a lot of times it was me playing Raze for the bottom action for that, just for the fast initiative, and then playing the top of Spur Their Spirits. Just because the top of Spur Their Spirits is more reliable to get out. The only restriction is that it has to be an ally within range 3. Another card that you can play to help out with Strike Now and being able to set that up to maximize it, or to be able to get the full ability out of it, is the top of Bring Them Down from level 1, which just gives you the ability to strengthen an ally at range 3, no dependent on an enemy dying or using the top of Raze. But then this card is a little awkward because you want to be going after the ally, like you want to be strengthening the ally after they've already gone this round, because otherwise, if you don't, they're going to get strengthened and then immediately lose strength in this round, then you're not going to be able to play Strike Now the following round to have them play a card. Now, there are some items that can help you. In Frosthaven, I think those items are a little bit easier to get because there are some potions that can help give you strength, and an ally can just consume it on their turn and say, like, don't worry, I'll worry about giving myself strengthened so that I can play an extra card this round or next round. In Gloomhaven, you don't have quite the same access to those things. So, all that to say that there's a very high ceiling you can hit with the top of Strike Now. It can be an incredibly powerful card, but you have to have a plan for how you're going to use it. You have to have ideas for how you're going to get your allies strengthened, and then how you are going to set them up for this attack. Another option you can do is that you do have a perk that potentially allows you to strengthen your allies after a long rest. But then if you do that, obviously you're also kind of restricted in the timing for when you play this card, because it would pretty much have to be right after you long rest. For me, maybe I just didn't do a good enough of a job of planning my build, or really having my plan for how I'm going to get those allies strengthened and then play the card correctly. It was when I'm managing 4 characters solo, and then already having to think about, like, okay, what ally do I want to get strengthened so that I can maximize the card that they want to play, or just thinking about which ally I want to be playing the extra card and how we're going to set up the positioning and all those things for that. Like, that was already a lot for me to think about. Having to add in the extra plan for, okay, now I also have to make sure that I get that ally strengthened before I play this card. It was just a lot of mental processing that was hard for me to manage sometimes. Whereas Spur Their Spirits was a much more reliable way to be able to get an ally to play an extra card. Anyway, this card also has a bottom half that is really good. Attack 2, Pierce 2 on the bottom of a card is very good. And I actually did play the bottom of this fairly often because of my, I'll say, inability to play the top action sometimes. Like, the top action of this is obviously way more powerful, but it is nice to have just a source of Pierce if you need it, and it's not on a sideboard card per se. Like, you're not just debating if you want to bring in that Pierce every scenario. If you get this card at level 4, you're going to be bringing it with you to every scenario, so you always have a source of Pierce available. It's a bottom attack, it infuses ice, it's doing a lot. There's a lot of great things about this card. The initiative is not one of them. And that's another thing, is that for the initiative for this card, you really need to pair it with a much faster card for the top of Strike Now, because unless that ally is going to strengthen themselves, if you are depending on your own ability to strengthen an ally, you can't rely on the initiative 52 for this, because you need to make sure that the round that you're playing this, you are going before the ally goes and loses their strengthen. Okay, I need to move on to the other card. Our other option at level 4 is Northern Valor. The top action is an attack 3, and then add +1 attack for each adjacent enemy and infuse ice. The bottom action is a loss that gives you 2 experience, and it says heal 8 self and strengthen, and if your current hit point value is equal to your maximum, gain ward. Otherwise, add +3 attack to your next attack this turn, and this is at initiative 84. Northern Valor, by nature, the top action is going to be at least an attack 4, because if you're doing that attack 3, you're going to be adjacent to an enemy, so you have to make it at least an attack 4. But hopefully this is really more of an attack 5, maybe an attack 6. And if you're able to do a non-loss attack 6 that infuses ice, that's really great. It's going to set you up for a nice turn next round, because you might be able to power up another like single target attack, or maybe a more defensive bottom half of a card to give yourself ward or something like that. And the bottom action is just a really nice effect that, you generally don't want to be playing losses early, and this loss plays very well into playing later into a scenario when you're already going to be lower on health. It's cool that it gives you different benefits based on if you are either at maximum health after the heal, or if you still have healing left, you're going to get something out of it either way. And in different situations, you might value one more over the other. But I will say, because you're strengthening self, it's really tempting to want to have that +3 attack. So you're doing potentially like an attack 7 or 8 at advantage. I think it's probably pretty clear which cards that I took, because the cards that I took, I feel like I'm talking about for like 4 minutes at a time, and these cards that I didn't take, I'm not talking about as much. But this is also just a much simpler card. I don't think there's as much to say about this. I think the value for it is going to be less variable. And it's not really hard to see the situations in which you would use this card or set up for it. The top is the thing you're going to be doing the most, and it just requires you to be adjacent to more enemies, which really isn't that big of a problem for Satha, because she wants to be near enemies for a variety of reasons. As for which card to take, the Take Command build is going to benefit more from Strike Now. I talked about it a bit with Spur Their Spirits, but these actions that allow you to give an ally the ability to play a card during your turn, they can vary a lot with how much they are going to benefit from that +1 attack from Take Command. Because if it's a multi-targeted attack, like the things that Cragheart has, even at like level 1, you can get so much value out of that. There's so much extra damage. And then like we mentioned before with Strike Now, like if you're able to pull it off, having that strengthened ally perform an attack with extra damage, it's mind-blowing how much output it can do and how much it can really turn a scenario early on. If you have allies that are mainly doing single target attacks, then these are they're not quite as valuable. But I actually don't remember if I talked about this with Spur Their Spirits. These cards that allow an ally to play another card too, you don't have to just look at it like, oh, I need to maximize the value that I'm going to get out of it for Take Command. For Strike Now, you probably want that ally to be playing an attack, but Spur Their Spirits, like even if you take Strike Now, I wouldn't replace Spur Their Spirits, because the more cards that you can have that can allow an ally to play, generally the better. You do have to be a little bit concerned maybe about ally endurance at that point, or at least put some thought into it. But it can help to just accelerate the setup that an ally is doing. For example, if your ally really wants to get out a summon in their turn, but then also do something else, a card like this is great because it allows them to do, get their summon out, do something else this turn, maybe get multiple summons out if they're trying to get multiple summons out in the same round. Both this card, but primarily Spur Their Spirits, can help enable those kinds of things. So if you're playing with Take Command, I would generally prefer to take Strike Now. But again, if you're going to take Strike Now, have a plan for how your allies are going to get strengthened and how you are going to set them up consistently to be able to play Strike Now throughout your scenario. If you're going to get behind me route, then Northern Valor is a little bit more enticing, because you're generally going to be around enemies more because you have that extra shield. You can stand being in the front lines for a longer period of time, so you're more likely to be surrounded by enemies and really capitalize on the amount of damage that you can do with Northern Valor. But I also think you can take Northern Valor if you don't want that extra overhead of how you're going to do the setup for Strike Now. First level 5 option is Armory. Top action is a persistent loss that says during your attacks you may move your character token on this card forward any number of spaces to add +2 damage to the attack for each space moved. You get 1 experience after the first time you use this, and then another experience every 2 times after that, so a total of 3 experience. Bottom action is a move 4, and then if you consume ice, shield 1, gain an experience, and then do an attack 1 muddle, and then add +X attack where X is equal to your shield value. This is all at initiative 14. This top action is so much fun because it basically represents 12 damage over the course of potentially 6 different attacks, but if you really wanted to, you could just throw it all into one attack. I haven't played with this action, but I could see the value of how versatile that could be because it could help you to just try to clear out one specific enemy that has, anywhere from 10 health to 14 health, maybe even just 4 health, or multiple enemies with a few health. You also don't have to use any charges at all when you attack. You could save all those charges because it says you may move your character token forward any number of spaces. So you're not required to do this. You can make this last as long or as shortly as you would like. The bottom action is great and super repeatable. It's a nice big movement at a very fast initiative. Not super fast, but pretty fast. It's the first time you can get shield on the bottom of the card. Granted, you do have to consume ice for it, but you have plenty of ways of infusing ice. And you can do an attack on top of it, which if you're running the Get Behind Me build, this is probably going to be something like an attack 3 total, maybe an attack 4 if you've also done a shield as a top action. And you're also throwing Muddle on top of that attack, so it's just continuing to add to both the offensive and defensive sides of this card. Overall, this is just an absolutely fantastic card. Our other option is Unleash the Archers. The top action says grant 2 allies within range 3, attack 2 at range 3, and infuse ice. The bottom action says attack 1 at range 3. If you consume ice, you add 1 attack to this, you add Muddle this, you get experience, so it can be an attack 2 Muddle at range 3. And then grant 1 ally who has Strengthen, attack 2, targeting the target of the attack ability at range 3. And this is at initiative 64. If you're running Take Command, then this is a very interesting card for you because it bumps the top action from basically attack 4 to attack 6. And then similarly, there's more setup required for that bottom action, but it can turn that from a maximum of like attack 4 to an attack 5. So that top action, I would say, is pretty damn great if you are running Take Command because being able to give your allies 2 attack 3s is very powerful. It's non-loss. You get to infuse ice with it. I had initially thought that by taking this, I might run into some situations where it might be a little awkward to use, where if I wanted my allies to be attacking an enemy that they were adjacent to, then I was going to have some problems with that. I never really found that awkwardness in the action. It was usually very easy to just make attacks that were not going to get disadvantaged. That range was always more beneficial to me, I would say, than it was never really a detractor for me. If you're not running the Take Command build, then this card is less enticing. Granting 2 allies attack 2s, it's not great. Especially if you're facing enemies with any kind of shield, you would rather just have that be a single big attack. But I mean, that's always kind of the debate between like many small attacks versus one big attack. That can have higher ceiling for many small attacks, but shield can interfere with you anyway. The bottom has the potential to be a very strong action if you are able to set everything up right. Like if you're able to maximize that, even without Take Command, I would say, if you're able to maximize that and get an attack 2 at range 3 and Muddle, and then you're able to grant that ally another attack 2 or maybe an attack 3 on that target, that's essentially attack 4, attack 5 from the bottom of a card, and you are muddling that enemy. That's really nice. You're not going to find that much damage on the bottom actions of cards, but obviously the counterpoint to it is that it is, there's a lot of setup required for it. Being able to consume ice, not too big of a deal. Like we have a lot of ice infusion at this point. It was very rare that I felt like I had I needed ice with Satha when I did not have it available. But the granting 1 ally who has Strengthen, it kind of goes back to the same conversation we just had on Strike Now. Like, I didn't feel like I was doing enough granting of Strengthen to allies to really make this a consistent thing that I could depend on. I think if you're able to set up for this bottom action consistently, then this becomes a card where, yeah, I would rather be playing this for the bottom action than the top action. But the amount of setup that you need to do for that bottom action as compared to the top action is just, it's dead simple. It's, you're getting those attacks. There's not a whole lot required for it. And the initiative card, or the initiative on this card is 64, so you're not playing this for the initiative. So I would say this is a good card. I think the top action kind of sets a relatively high floor for this card, But the bottom action, it can have a high ceiling. It's just hard to hit that ceiling. For me, it was at least. As for which card to take, it's going to be like my initial reaction is to say, well, the Get Behind Me build should take Armory. The Take Command build should take Unleash the Archers. You know, done and dusted. There we go. But I wouldn't necessarily just strictly stick to that mindset. I think if you are the Get Behind Me build, you are almost certainly going to want to take Armory just because I don't think you're going to get enough value out of Unleash the Archers. If you're not playing Take Command, then the top action of Unleash the Archers isn't that great for you. And then like we just talked about, the bottom action requires a lot of setup for it to be great. Whereas on Armory, you're getting a bottom action that is solid all around. It has a lot of really good stuff for you, and it's had a much better initiative. And then similarly for the Take Command build, like, yes, that top action on Unleash the Archers, it does really lean into Take Command. You're getting, you know, quote unquote 2 charges for the 2 grants that you're doing on the top of Unleash the Archers. But at the same time, if up to this level up you have been following the cards where it's like, oh, this feels like the obvious Take Command choice, then at that point you've gotten Outmaneuver, you've gotten Raze, you've gotten Strike Now. All of these cards are cards that I would say you generally want to be playing. I also just realized I have my little centered dot on there. That's funny. I'm not going to edit that out. You also realize like you've gotten a lot of cards up to this point that have, you know, other than the case of Raze, you haven't gotten great initiatives. You started downgrading the total initiatives I think that you have in your hand. Plus you've taken a lot of cards that really rely on top actions to like get the most value out of the card. And now I need my red dot back to recenter this. So I wouldn't just take Unleash the Archers because of those grant actions for the Take Command build. I would strongly consider taking Armory here, or maybe going back and taking a card from a previous level up. But at the same time, like I do think Armory is a great fit here. I mean, I think it's just a awesome bottom action that you can play consistently, get a lot out of it from both defense and offense. And then once you're ready to play that top action, like you can always use every charge of that top action in every scenario. Our first card at level 6 is Crashing Steel. The top action is an attack 3, push 2, then move 2, and then if you consume ice, attack 3, gain an experience. The bottom action is a loss. It gives you 2 experience if you play it, and it says move 4, jump, and then target or attack 2, targeting all adjacent enemies, and put brittle on them, and then infuse ice, and this is at initiative 29. If you're playing Gloomhaven 2nd Edition, then you may not be familiar with Brittle because it is a Frosthaven status, but Brittle doubles the next source of damage on an enemy, or rather on a figure. Brittle is removed after that damage is dealt, and then Brittle can also be removed if that figure is healed. So Brittle is effectively a nice setup condition to try to deal a ton of damage in a follow-up attack, or with trying to push an enemy through a trap or something like that. So the bottom of this card could be played as a nice piece to pair with the top of Lead the Charge, where because you're getting a lot of movement out of the bottom action of Crashing Steel, and then you're probably going to be getting into the middle of a bunch of enemies, doing some attacks to them, and then brittling them, and then you can, you know, take Lead the Charge and do a nice big attack, an attack 4, and then double that. Oh, actually, I was thinking that you could double the damage from the trap effect of this if you use the push, but no, I'm sorry. The damage from the attack would be the thing that gets doubled from Brittle. You'd have to have a pure push effect without dealing damage, or some other way of moving an enemy into a trap to actually get the damage from a trap. Anyway, Brittle is a really cool effect. It's a shame that this is the first time that we're seeing it in Gloomhaven, because it makes for a nice fun way of trying to set up things. I think Satha is a character that we've already been kind of thinking about, like how do we help set up other characters for like successful turns, specifically if you're going for the Take Command build. I think Brittle is a nice effect that also puts you in that same mindset. So it would have been cool to have a card, maybe a non-loss card with Brittle earlier on, but it is a really strong effect. So you kind of have to be careful with where you are placing that condition. Anyway, that's all for the loss action. The top action is non-loss, and attack 3, push 2, move 2, and then do another attack 3. You generally only want to be doing this if you are going to be and I won't say only, because the push does, you can get a lot of mileage out of that push. I generally tried to only play this card if I was going to be consuming ice to make it effectively an attack 6 with some push and some movement. Alternatively, there are situations where you could choose to not play this with consuming the ice on that top action, because you could say you're going to attack an enemy that's adjacent to you, you're going to push them, and then you're going to move away because, oh, they're doing a big attack, and if you move away from them after pushing them, you can get out of range of that attack. So there is a lot of versatility there, and it is nice just to get another source of push, especially if you have not been keeping Lead the Charge in your hand. You don't really have much forced movement, so being able to get another source of forced movement that is a non-loss is really nice. The 29 initiative is fine. It's something where if you're in a pinch, you could use that as your initiative card on your turn, but if you're in the middle of battle, you probably still are hoping that you can play something a little bit faster than that. But overall, good card, relatively simple compared to some of the things that we've seen with Satha so far. Our other option is Defiance, which has a top action of consume ice to get heal to self, gain one experience, then do an attack to stun, and then grant all allies within range 3 move 1. The bottom action is remove one negative condition you have, and then if you consume ice, you get to immobilize an adjacent enemy and gain an experience, and then you can move 3, and this is at initiative 47. The top action has a non-loss stun, so that should immediately grab your attention of what else is built around this, and is it worth taking this card? And there's a lot of other things built around this non-loss stun. Doing an attack 2, yeah, the attack 2 is not like any kind of crazy amount of damage, but it's an attack 2 with a stun, so the damage is just a nice little extra cherry on top. If you consume ice, then you get that heal to self and an experience. You have way better effects that you can be using for that ice consumption, but there's not a lot of effects that you have. It depends on the card choices that you've taken at level ups, but you don't have a ton of things that you want to be consuming ice for on the bottom actions of cards. So in a lot of cases, you may say, oh, well, I don't really need this 2 healing, but I'm not doing anything else with this ice, so I'm just going to use it. And in that case, a heal 2 is just, it's nice. Why not have it? You can also use it to remove some conditions like poison and wound. And then being able to grant all allies some movement with your top action is also very nice. And if you have take command out, this goes from move 1 to move 2, doubling its effectiveness. With that bottom action, I think the only negative condition that you would not be able to remove would technically be stun, because it does not say that you can still play this action when you have stun. And I think the main intent was that if you have immobilize, you can use immobilize to get the heck out of somewhere, and then you end up effectively disarming an enemy by immobilizing them and then moving away from them. But removing a negative condition can also be nice if you get disarmed, if you have poison, but then you still end up wanting to be doing a nice heal. So this card offers you a lot of versatility, but the main thing I think to highlight from it is that non-loss stun. Everything else is just kind of like other situations that you can use this card in that can make it very good. And the initiative sucks, but hopefully you've taken other cards with stronger initiatives that you don't mind taking an initiative 47 if you want this card. As for which card to take, this one's a little bit of a toss-up. I don't think neither of these initiatives stands out as a defining factor for the card. The initiative on Crashing Steel is obviously a bit better. I think at this point you should have a feel for what is your Satha missing? Do you want more offensive capabilities? If so, then I would go with Crashing Steel, because the top action of that gives you multiple attacks for yourself, and that bottom loss gives you a nice, decent AoE, melee AoE. And so it will give you a lot of opportunity to draw attack modifiers, and you can get some interesting attack modifiers, especially one in particular that can allow you to grant allies attacks, which also stacks nicely with Take Command. So even if you are running a Take Command build, Crashing Steel can give you that value of making it more likely to draw that modifier. Meanwhile, maybe you feel that your Satha is doing enough damage and what you really value is a little bit of crowd control, in which case Defiance is going to do a lot of that for you. You have an ability on both the top and the bottom that can effectively neutralize one enemy's attack for this round. And if you don't have any other characters in your party that have a non-loss stun ability, that could be a defining factor for you. So I would base this off of what do you feel like your Satha is missing or could use more of, what is your party composition missing? And if you're still unsure after all that, if you're not sure that you really want that stun, if you really care about having that stun from Defiance, if you'd rather, like, just, if you're still unsure at this point, just take Crashing Steel. You can do some big damage with it. But honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these cards. For level 7, we start with Send Them Reeling. The top action is an attack 3, push 2, and if you consume ice, you can immobilize and gain an experience, and you're attacking the 3 enemies in front of and adjacent to you. The bottom action is a persistent card, non-loss, and it says, on the next 2 attacks performed by an adjacent ally, add plus X to the attack, where X is equal to your shield value when the attack is performed. This has 2 charges, you get an experience after the second charge, and this infuses ice, and this is all at initiative 20. So all Sathas would like that top action from Send Them Reeling. That is a nice big AoE attack. If you are getting 3 enemies in there, which is not that hard to do if you're playing in a party of 4, but even if you're only hitting 2 of them, you're basically getting an attack 6 to an attack 9 out of it, and you're doing that force movement with a push, and you are immobilizing if you consume ice. So you're, again, going back to the whole pattern of offensive and defensive. This is an offensive attack, and then you're also getting some defensive capabilities out of it because hopefully they were melee enemies and they were doing melee attacks, and you're now just preventing them from actually doing any damage. The bottom action is geared more towards the Get Behind Me Satha build because you're going to have some more... If you were doing that build, then you would have focused on getting more shield cards anyway. So what I would recommend for this is that maybe think of it as like an average of, you're going to be adding... At the time that this is going to be used, you'll have an average of 2 shield. So you can add plus 2 attack to 2 attacks, so this is essentially equivalent to 4 damage. But I will say that this action has a very high ceiling on it because it is not just for the round that you have to do this. It is an actual persistent card. So you could do the setup for this before going into a room, and then with some cards that we'll see shortly, or with a card we'll see shortly, you could have 4 shield, which is going to be adding plus 4 to 2 attacks. There is a chance that you could go higher than that too. For example, I think this could be a funny card to stack with the top of Stand Firm, where Satha sets up with Send Them Reeling in the round prior, then in the current round goes into a room and just takes a bunch of attacks from enemies, stacks a bunch of shield, and now towards the end of that round you have your allies come in and try to get some attacks off. Granted, you still have to make sure that your allies can get adjacent to you to actually be able to benefit from this, because it does say the the next 2 attacks performed by an adjacent ally. So you need to make sure that you don't get completely surrounded and block off the opportunity for your allies to actually benefit from that. But there's also a level 9 card that we could see that could make the ceiling for this card kind of silly. It's just an interesting mechanic too, with having, like, turning some of your defensive capabilities into offensive capabilities. Our other card at level 7 is for Frosthaven. The top action is grant 1 ally within range 3 2 of the following 3 abilities in any order: move 4, attack 4, heal 4 self, and this infuses ice. The bottom action is move 4 and then add plus 2 attack to the next attack an ally performs during this turn, and this is at initiative 79. That top action is great in terms of the versatility it can provide. You may be adding plus 1 to the move and attack if you are doing the take command build. But maybe you need an ally to move up and then do an attack, or attack and then move away, or attack and heal, or maybe move and heal if you're not trying to kill all the enemies. This is an action that just consistently in every rest cycle is going to find a useful way to help you and your allies. The bottom action is pretty good. You may actually put a lot of value on that move 4, depending on what cards you've taken at your level ups to this point, because you may not have taken a lot of movement-based actions. And so having a nice solid move 4 in here on a level 7 card, it could help you. The ability to add plus 2 attack is obviously only going to be really useful if you've already taken a fair amount of grants up to this point, because it has to be during your turn. It's not just during this round, it's during your turn. So this one I think is very much meant to be played with the take command build, because it's basically saying that instead of adding plus 1, you're going to add plus 3 to that ally's attack total, at least for the next attack. And the take command build has generally been the one taking those grant actions more consistently. Though even if you're playing Get Behind Me, you probably, it is possible that you took some grant actions before that grant attacks. In which case maybe you get some value out of this, but it's nowhere near the value of the bottom of the other card. in terms of possible offensive output, because the other one, you know, very easily could hit +4 damage total over the course of a couple of attacks. This one's more limited in terms of saying it has to be, it's just +2 to 1 attack. The initiative 79 isn't bad because at least it's better than the middling initiatives that we've seen from a number of our level ups so far. But the thing that's a little bit disappointing about it is that if you are the Satha who has been doing the take command and been taking all the cards that you would expect to take with all the grant actions on them, you've already gotten a lot of middling to late initiative. So it would be nice to get a faster initiative at this level up, but if you're going to take this card, you're not getting that benefit. As for which card to take, if you're playing Get Behind Me, you're probably taking Send Them Reeling. If you're playing Take Command, you're probably taking 4 Frosthaven, mainly because the bottom action on the cards is not that useful if you are taking them in the reverse. So if you're playing Take Command and you take Send Them Reeling, the bottom action is not that useful. But if you are playing Get Behind Me, Send Them Reeling, I think, just has both halves that you would love to play. Both of them are really good. For Frosthaven, I think in a vacuum is a good card on its own, but I think it also depends on just some of the cards that you've taken at level ups, because your hand may be filling up with middling to bad initiatives, or middling to late initiatives, I should say, depending on the cards that you've taken so far. This is another situation where you also really want to be playing that top action. The bottom action is okay, but nowhere near as good as the top. And so for the Take Command build, I wouldn't blame you if you went back and were starting to look at some of the cards that you skipped on other level ups and just to see what you were missing. But I did take 4 Frosthaven here with my Take Command build, and I did really like that top action. At level 8, our first card is Lead from the Front. The top action is Shield 1, and then if you consume Ice, shield an extra 1 and get an experience. And then if after each attack ability targeting you this round, perform Heal 1, Range 2. Then the bottom action is Heal 2, targeting 1 ally within range 3, and Ward and Strengthen them. And then if you consume Ice, then you get to Brittle at range 1 and gain an experience. This is all at initiative 10. This top action can really help you supercharge the bottom of Send the Reeling if that's how you want to try to stack up shield in order to get that bonus attack damage for allies. And then being able to heal 1 after each of the attacks against you is awesome. You're probably going to be using those on yourself, but you have some flexibility if you need to use them on allies. But if you have Get Behind Me out, then you're already potentially at shield 3, so you may just be outright shielding a lot of the damage that's coming your way. So you may, depending on what level you're playing at, be able to just get a net positive increase in health. Otherwise, you're at least doing things like clearing the poison off of you if you get poisoned, or clearing wound off of you. It is a very tanky action. But there's also a reason to take this card if you are playing the Take Command build, and if you took Strike Now at level 4, because the bottom action gives you a bottom ability that lets you grant an ally Strengthen. Or technically just give, not grant. Give an ally Strengthen. This bottom action combined with Strike Now, or even just an ally just doing their attack on their turn, can help you to just obliterate an enemy, because you have that, if you do that Ice Consumption at the bottom, you're getting Brittle on an enemy, you're potentially doubling the damage that they're going to take from a next attack. This is just such a beautiful setup card. Our other card is Bonded Through Battle. The top action is a persistent loss that has 5 charges, which says, at the end of this and your next 4 turns, one ally within range 3 may immediately play 1 card from their hand and perform the top or bottom action of the card. You'll get 3 experience from this total. The bottom action is a move 3 and then perform one of the following abilities. Strengthen Self or Loot 1, and this is all at initiative 72. The amount that the top action can accelerate your party's action economy is incredible. You're probably going to be saving this for maybe the middle to the end of a scenario. You probably want to be saving it for the middle, so that way you're at least making sure that you can capitalize on all of those charges. And then you're also able to make use of that bottom action, which is also very good because it has a self-strengthen on it. Move and self-strengthen is great. But I will also say that depending on your party composition, you may have a party that takes a round or 2 to get set up before they're actually able to be fully effective. And so if you played this in the first round, I could believe that you'd be successful. You're obviously hurting your endurance quite a bit by playing a loss that early. You may need to change your playstyle a bit with your, if you're playing with take command or get behind me, just to make sure that you are clearing that card and getting it back into your hand when you need an even number of hands for your rest cycles. Like, that could be something that helps you counterbalance the loss played early. But oftentimes, if you're able to just absolutely demolish the first room, that can be something that by itself helps you to be successful for the rest of the scenario, because you're going into every other room after that in better shape than you would have been expected to be at that point. Again, it is also something to consider that by doing this, you are accelerating the endurance for all of your teammates, so they have to be a little bit more aware too of how it's affecting them for the current rest cycle. But usually an action like this is going to mean significantly more damage, significantly more quickly, and therefore killing enemies, resulting in less damage to you. But also in Frosthaven, where you have a lot of objectives that aren't necessarily just kill all enemies, I think this could even have a more interesting impact on your scenarios, because you could be playing it for movement, so you can get in and out of rooms much more quickly. It's a little more limiting in that sense, because for this one you do have to be within range 3 of your allies, but still, very, very fun card to have to think through. If you're playing solo on 4 characters, rip to your brain, but also enjoy the crazy shit you can do. And then, yeah, I mentioned it before, the move 3 Strength and Self is incredible. You do still have a lot of attacks that you're going to be doing on your own. Even if you're doing take command and you're leaning into a lot of those grants, you still have at least a few strong attacks that you can be doing, so you can still benefit from that Strength and Self. But I will say it is a little bit more counterintuitive for you. You'd rather be putting that strength in on somebody else, because then that enables some of your other abilities. So in that sense, I think I would rather this be strengthening an ally. And then the Initiative 72 is, once again, with the take command, you've already gotten a lot of late initiatives. You may look at this card and just say, I'm sick of having these late initiatives, I need something better. But let's talk about that when we're talking about which card to pick. If you are playing a defensive Satha with Get Behind Me, or, well, I don't know if you're playing a defensive Satha somehow without Get Behind Me, but Lead from the Front is an excellent card. Again, both sides, fantastic. It's a very tanky top action with a very strong setup bottom action. You will love this card. I would say that even if you're playing the Get Behind Me build, like, you have more attacks that you're going to be doing on your own. You actually could benefit more from that bottom strengthen from Bonded Through Battle. So, like, I could see a scenario, or I could see you wanting to take that card for the bottom strengthen, but at the same time, I would be hard pressed to say skip Lead from the Front, because that shield 2 at the top is just so good. If you are playing the take command, I also lean towards Lead from the Front, mainly because it is a bottom action that allows you to strengthen an ally. It gives you like a guaranteed way that you can play Strike Now. It's coming a little late at level 8, so maybe you already have much more. Maybe you already have a bunch of consistent ways that you can get your ally strengthened, where they can strengthen themselves, allowing you to play Strike Now. In which case, sure, maybe you do lean back towards Bonded Through Battle. But the other things that Lead from the Front gives you are, you kind of need some better initiative cards, most likely. Again, if you don't, maybe you lean towards Bonded Through Battle. But you're healing an ally, you're strengthening them, you're warding them, and you're setting up with a nice brittle. While I think both halves of Bonded Through Battle can be really good, I just feel like they kind of play against each other a little bit, where yes, you can strengthen yourself, and yes, even if you're going with the take command build, you are still going to have some attacks for yourself. But, like, I don't know, to really benefit from that strengthened self, you're going to be playing multiple attacks for yourself as top actions for this round and the following round, which means you're not doing those grant abilities that you've been leaning into up to this point in the build. And I'll keep coming back to those initiatives, but I would say a good case for if you wanted to take Bonded Through Battle, it is a great card to pair with Crashing Steel from level 6. So that is a good option. If you took Crashing Steel at level 6, then it could be a little bit more enticing to do Bonded Through Battle. But generally, I lean towards Lead from the Front. At level 9, our first card is Stand Against Many. The top action is Attack 3, targeting all adjacent enemies. If you consume ice, you get 1 extra attack and an experience as an Attack 4, targeting all adjacent enemies. Then you can shield 1 and add +1 shield for each 2 enemies targeted by the attack ability. The bottom action is a persistent loss that says add +2 attack to all your attacks while there are more enemies than allies within range 2, and this is at Initiative 13. That top action just looks like a blast to play with because it's just like you're just looking for those clumps of enemies and you're like, let me just throw myself in the middle of them so that I can do a big attack. And then, oh, because I'm around a bunch of enemies and I attacked them, I can now get a bunch of shield. Like if you're probably playing Get Behind Me with this card, but this card has the potential to give you maybe like shield 3. I guess the ceiling for it is technically shield 4 if you had the perfect ring of enemies around you and then you were able to like jump in the middle of them or something like that. But even if you're only doing like an attack against 3 enemies, let's say, and that only gives you +1 shield, you're still shielding for 2. Combined with the shield that you already have from Get Behind Me, you're shielding for 3 total. That's awesome. You don't have to hit this card's or this action ceiling for it to be a great action. And then we get to a bottom action that, like, it has the potential to be a build-changing action. Like, you could do a build around this. Satha doesn't get a ton of AoEs, but I'm thinking about actions like this, the top of Send Them Reeling, where you can now turn that into attack 5s if there are more enemies. That's kind of enticing. Realistically, you're probably not building around that. Maybe you are. If you are, I want to know how you did it. I want to know what your experience was with it. But realistically, you're probably just playing that towards like the middle to end of a scenario because the top action for Stand Against Many is incredibly good, offensive and defensive. Our other card is Fight as 1. The top action is a loss. It gives you 2 experience and it says strengthen target 2 within range 1, then attack 5, and then grant all allies who have strengthened attack 5. The bottom action is grant all allies within range 3 and self move 3, attack 2, and infuse ice, and this is all at initiative 37. Now, if you're playing Take Command, then holy hell, this bottom action is finally like an incredible bottom action that you want to be playing consistently. It's a level 9, so it should be like crazy strong, but being able to do, I mean, you're granting allies move 4, attack 3. That's just like an okay turn for a mercenary on their own. I mean, granted, it'd be an okay turn for a lower level mercenary, but like you're basically just doing a bunch of mercenary turns for all your mercenaries. Oh, and it's actually also just registering to me that says all allies, not just all characters, but all allies. So if you have summons in the area, holy shit, that is a disgusting amount of movement and attack that you're granting. The top action is also a really strong loss. Obviously, you're giving advantage to a couple of allies. You're doing an attack 5, and then you're at this. Like you probably have Take Command if you're taking this card. You're granting attack 6 as at advantage. That's 17 damage that you're dealing out before attack modifiers. If other allies are strengthened, you may just already be able to give them an extra attack as well because you're not limited to the allies that you granted strengthen from that top action. It's slightly limiting because the strengthen that you're granting is only within range 1. You shouldn't have too much issue with that because you should have plenty of actions that allow you to grant movement to other allies and get them next to you to get the full value out of this. And it is a great action, it's a lot of damage output, but what really excites me about this card is the non-loss action on it, which is just, oh, well, that's so good. As for which card to take whichever you want. At this point, you should know which card you'd be leaning towards. But if you need some advice, then yeah, Stand Against Many is going to be better for the Get Behind Me build. Fight as 1 is going to be better for the Take Command build. Now for perks. One perk that I generally recommend pretty early for all Sathas is this. Ignore item -1 effects, and whenever you would gain stun, prevent the condition. Being able to ignore item -1 effects is great for you. You're generally going to be on the front line, so you want items that are going to give you defensive capabilities like shield. Those often come with penalties for being able to add -1 cards into your attack modifier deck. I personally just like being able to remove that restriction as early as possible, but how early you take this may also just depend on how early you're planning on getting some of those items. These are some other perks I would look at taking somewhat early. It's going to depend on which build you're going for, but replace one -2 card with a +0 is always great. Just get rid of that -2. Replace one -1 card with one shield 1 card is excellent. This is probably one I would prioritize over some of these other ones. But being able to remove negative cards and being able to get shield cards in there, again, almost all Sathas are going to be on the front lines. You're going to be doing at least some attacks by yourself. So getting that shield is excellent. Then being able to replace a -1 card with a +0 ice card. This is one, like out of these 4 that I've kind of highlighted here, this is the one that I'd probably take towards the later end of this. Maybe you prioritize this a little bit more if you are the get behind me build because you're just looking to remove more of those -1 cards. You're going to be doing more attacks on your own than compared to the Take Command Satha. So being able to remove the -1 cards is the best part of it. Getting +0 ice cards. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think you already infuse enough ice, so I don't think it's critical that you get these, but it's nice if you can just kind of get a surprise ice infusion. And then that 4th perk that I marked down there, whenever you long rest, perform strengthen 1 ally within range 3. I think that I did not take this early enough with my build. I think this is something that could have helped me, especially with Strike Now. So for the Satha that is doing Take Command, I think this is a higher priority perk than I had initially realized. Getting a free Strengthen on a rest cycle is great. Now we'll just go down the list and talk about the rest of the perks. Replace 2 +0 cards with 1 +1 heal, 1 ally, and self card. This is another great perk that is not just upgrading some of your attack modifier cards in terms of attack output. The heal 1, target 1 ally and self is nice because you don't need to be getting a lot of healing out of it. It could be doing a little bit of healing, it could be removing a negative condition, but also there's no range restriction on that targeting 1 ally. They do still have to be line of sight, but it's powerful in that sense. Replace 2 +1 cards with 2 +2 cards. Not much to say about it. It's a nice upgrade to your attack output. You're probably saving this for later after you've already gotten more of those negative cards out of your attack modifier deck. Add 1 +0, grant 1 ally within range 3, attack 2, range 3, or attack 3. This is an excellent perk. The Take Command Satha does benefit from it a little bit more in terms of they get to upgrade the attacks that their ally are doing, assuming that this modifier is drawn on Satha's turn. But I think if you're going for the Get Behind Me build, you may be doing attacks on your own more often, so you're more likely to draw this. So Get Behind Me build that is, or a Satha that is doing more attacks, obviously is going to be drawing more attack modifiers. You are more likely to see the value out of this. But all Sathas are going to be doing some attacks on their own, so I think this is an excellent card because it's flexible in terms of, yeah, you could do an attack 3 at melee, but if your ally is not in melee distance to an enemy, okay, do a slightly worse attack at range 3. This is a perk I would prioritize earlier. I may have even should have included it in that like first grouping of perks that I did with the 4. Maybe I should have bumped it up to 5 because I love this perk. Next is add 1 rolling disarm and 1 +0, grant 1 ally within range 3, move 2 rolling card. Both of these are very nice effects to draw. The disarm could be hit or miss. You might get unlucky with it coming at a time where maybe you're killing an enemy with the attack, or the enemy was not going to be doing any kind of attack anyway, so maybe the disarm doesn't matter. But the rolling aspect of it, you're adding cards outright to your attack modifier deck. The rolling aspect of it technically makes it so that they're not really extra cards, but obviously advantage and disadvantage can kind of mess with that. So both of these can be strong. They're a little bit more situational when you can't expect the effect, so I wouldn't take this perk super early. Next is add 2 ward range 1 rolling cards. These are nice. They can give you ward. You can put ward on allies if you have other melee ally attackers. If you take this perk twice, you're getting 4 of those cards in there, which means you can be drawing this card somewhat reliably. But if you're playing in a small party and you already have, if you're already warding yourself fairly consistently, then this perk has a little bit of limited value, but it's being able to get that many sources of ward, like this can potentially save you a very large chunk of health, especially at higher levels. Next, we have all initiative values may be discussed freely and precisely. As a solo player, this was absolutely meaningless to me. Obviously, this can be a very powerful effect. The fact that when you're playing solo, you kind of have this inherently, and the developers have said that, okay, well, that is worth at least adding a half a level to your scenario level calculation. That should tell you how strong this kind of effect can be. The downside is that if you are playing in a group where this perk can matter, it could slow down your games depending on who's in your party and if people get into analysis paralysis. Like for somebody like me, yes, it is very strong, but this sends me down some long paths of trying to figure out the optimal play. So this perk, your mileage may vary. With great power comes great responsibility. Know your party and figure out if it is going to slow you guys down too much. And then lastly, we have the first time each scenario that you or an ally exhaust, perform heal 3, target all, then ward and strengthen all as well. This can be an incredibly powerful perk. If you take this perk, it can warrant you saying like, okay, I need one of your allies, just send them off to go die. Maybe it's you, maybe it's an ally. It does say the ally exhausts, so it does have to be a character ally because only characters can exhaust. But the effect is extremely powerful. I think where your mileage may vary is how often characters are exhausting in your scenario. But the way I play, I usually end up trying to just not have any characters exhaust, which honestly is a little bit of a suboptimal way to play because exhausting characters is not necessarily always a bad thing. There are strategic times to do it. Taking this perk does give you a strategic way to use exhaustion. Even if you're not doing it intentionally, then it's kind of even better because I think there was at least one scenario where this significantly raised my chances of winning the scenario. For Masteries, our first one says, for an entire scenario, have at least one ally perform a move or attack ability during each of your turns except when performing a long rest. Then the second Mastery says, for an entire scenario, never have an ally be a target of an attack. That first perk can technically be easier depending on how many grant abilities you have. I don't think it's even possible to do this at level 1. I'm not sure at which level it becomes even possible to do this because you would have enough grant abilities in your hand. You could cheese this a little bit if you wanted to and just exhaust early because I think that would count because you no longer have any turns after you exhaust. So if you, for the few turns that you were alive, if you did this, then you could complete it. But also that's going to make the scenario significantly more difficult for your allies. The second Mastery is much easier to get early on, in my opinion. It also depends on your party size. If you're playing in a party of 4, that is going to be really hard to do. If you're able to drop down to a party of 2 just to be able to complete that Mastery, then it becomes much more achievable. But you also need to be aware of the monsters and their abilities for the scenario they're going to try to do this, because if you get a surprise multi-target enemy and you're not able to kill them, then that can kind of put a damper on it and ruin this Mastery for you late into a scenario, which sucks. But I like having at least one Mastery that you can complete early on if you are thinking about it and trying to intentionally do it, and I think you can get that with that second Mastery. Now we're going to talk about the solo scenario item, so if you don't want to see any of that, you don't want the spoilers for it, then avert your gaze now, but I will jump over to it now. Satha's solo item is the Crest of Frosthaven, and it says whenever you long rest, infuse ice and flip this card over. And if we flip it over, then it says whenever an ally rests, you may flip this card over to grant them heal to self, and then you can flip it back over. This is a one-handed item. Yeah, don't be like me and forget that these items that have 2 sides, that they have a front and back technically, and you have to start with it on its front side. And for Satha's item, the Crest of Frosthaven, this side that says whenever you long rest is the front. You have to start with this on the at the start of a scenario. But it's a great item. It plays really well into how Satha plays. Being able to, especially if you take that perk at for Satha, which lets you grant an ally strengthen for long rests, being able to do that and infuse ice in your long rests, you generally want to be doing long resting anyway with Satha. You want to avoid short resting where you can, because you are going to be doing, or you're going to be having items that generally have defensive capabilities. They have charges on them. You want to be getting those items back every rest cycle. So it plays into her want and desire to be long resting anyway. And then looking at the other side of this, when you have an ally that rests, this can be a short rest or a long rest. So maybe they clear a poison on their long rest and then you heal them for 2, or maybe they just heal for 4 total on their turn. Or maybe they short rested and they got some healing. Like, there's a lot of versatility in this side. So I think this is fairly easy to use both sides every rest cycle. For final thoughts, I think Satha is such a fun character to play. Having abilities that allow you to give allies the ability to play an extra card from their hand really opens up some possibilities in terms of accelerating your plans and how you do setup, to just dealing out a significant amount of damage faster than expected. In terms of playstyle, she's going to change a bit depending on which of these cards you really want to focus on as kind of being like your main card that you're playing for her, Get Behind Me or Take Command. Her level ups are kind of geared towards benefiting one card or the other a little bit more. Get Behind Me, you're trying to do some shielding as well as attacking on your own, and then Take Command, you're trying to grant your allies attacks as well as doing attacks on your own when you're not granting allies attacks. If you play the Get Behind Me build, I think it is going to be a little less interesting early on, but you really build up some of that interest as you start to level up. Like some of those later level up cards have some really cool effects with how you balance the shield and some offensive capabilities that you can get from having that shield. For Take Command, I think you need to be a little bit better about planning out how you want to level up over the course of your character's lifetime, because if you just go the default path of the cards that you're geared towards Take Command, then I think you are going to have the initiatives in your hand aren't going to be great, and I think you need to balance that out a little bit and maybe dip into the cards that are quote-unquote meant for the Get Behind Me build. And overall, I just love her. I think she's so much fun. She's not very high complexity on her own, but the dynamic that she brings to your party and the changes that she brings to your party and how your party plays as a whole is very interesting. If you've played Satha, let me know your thoughts. I'm curious to hear, like, what are there cards that you think I undervalued? Are there cards that you think are more key to building around her? Are there other builds that I didn't really consider, like combinations of the cards that I didn't consider? And let me know your thoughts if you played her in Frosthaven specifically, because I'm really interested to hear how she plays in Frosthaven compared to Gloomhaven. I touched on some of those differences that I think are there based on how I played her, but let me know your thoughts as well. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Take care.